Good morning. I want to start by asking you a question. Have you ever had a transformative experience? By transformative, I mean something that fundamentally changes the way you think about the world around you. An epiphany, a profound moment of clarity, or even a sense that you can change something or impact something that maybe a minute just prior you and your friends thought was impossible. For some, this happens in a religious setting, like what happened to me when I was 12, when I realized that I had the power to guide me for the rest of my life, just within me. For others, it's an artistic setting, like what happened when I first encountered a Basquiat and my life changed forever again. Still, there are those who need a wider community context, like when we watched the first human being set foot on the moon, or the tragedy of 9/11, or even the hope that came with the election of Barack Obama for some, and for others, the fear. You know, in my opinion, I don't think the problem is that we don't know how to trust. It's that we've been socialized to the material world to such an extent that we don't trust our innermost authentic selves. But I believe that it's in that moment that we come to trust ourselves, that we become powerful. And that power allows us to connect with other powerful human beings and then work together in a community to change the world around us. So I've learned that there are 3 steps to move from trust to transformation. The first is that internal self-trust. The second is external, building a community of trust. And the third is activating that trust, or active trust. I've experienced all 3 through my experiences as a musician. Learning to trust yourself is as much about being open to the possibility that you are capable of more than you ever thought, as it is accepting that we may have been socialized to be less so that others, a very few, can be more. My first conscious experience with trusting myself came around the time I was 12 years old, a musician in the church. I started playing drums at 2, I began playing for church choirs at 6, and I became professional at 12. And what I learned early in that work in the black church was that our role as musicians was to remove ourselves, or die to self, remove our ego from the situation so that we can allow the God of the gospel to move through us and enact transformation within the congregation. You know, it was one of these moments, and we call that energy the anointing. It was in one of those moments that I was filled, I was consumed with this energy that seemed to emanate from the inside out. And I realized that I was more, I could be more, and that I had to then do the work to build that next level, that next phase of my existence. As I began to do that work of becoming, I started to seek out other musicians, like-minded musicians, and look for ways in which that power was modeled in real time with other ensembles. That search took me outside the walls of the church, and I learned about the work of John Coltrane. John Coltrane is a jazz musician who created a work called A Love Supreme. And when I first heard this piece, it again changed my life. There's a great story of Branford Marsalis asking Elvin Jones, the drummer in this picture, how does that ensemble, the John Coltrane Quartet, get to the level of passion, power, and intensity it did in such a short time? They were only together for a few years. And in the colorful way that Elvin spoke, modified for a family-friendly audience, he said, you have to be willing to die for your ensemble. When I heard these notes, I understood that this should be the opening of A Love Supreme. So we hear from the opening invocation of A Love Supreme, the first movement called Acknowledgement, the beginnings of what for many was a transformative album. It changed us from the inside out. And this can be shown, it can be measured empirically in the field of science or physics called cymatics. Cymatics is a Greek word that means wave. And those of us who study cymatics, we study the way sound waves or frequencies affect the physical world. There's a great researcher named Dr. Masaru Emoto, and he wrote a book called Messages from Water. There's a great video on YouTube as well, where he showed that water from the tap, just sink, when seen under a microscope, looks just clear. You can see right through it. But when you put it in the middle of a room and you have people bless or curse the water that was once clear then develops these beautiful geometric shapes if it was blessed, or these strange, disfigured shapes if it was cursed. We literally, through nomo, the power of the word, and the intentions behind the word, have the ability to change ourselves, each other, and the world around us at the molecular level. In my own work, I searched, as I said, for like-minded musicians, and I found them, and we've been working together for about 20 years now. We were all very confident in our individual skills, super confident. It took us about 5 years to figure out how to trust each other in the band. And then the last 10, 15 years or so, we've learned to activate that trust. What you're going to see is a short clip of a recent performance where we're playing a rhythm called a bembe rhythm. It's a Yoruban rhythm in worship of the Orisha, or what we might call angels. And the rhythm is consistent, and then it gets suspended. It builds tension, and then we set up a powerful solo by our saxophonist. Thank you. So, what you saw was Dr. William Minifield on piano, bassist Dean Hewlett, and myself set up this rhythm and build intensity and then let it go, and that kind of unstable rhythm builds more intensity. And our saxophonist, Edwin Bayard, comes in with pure sound, not notes. And we then go to that next level. And many people at the end of that performance came up and remarked how they were transformed, how that performance really touched them, and even in some cases healed them. So you've seen and we've talked about how this works on the bandstand, but I submit to you that it happens outside of the bandstand, beyond the stage. In the work that I'm doing at the Columbus Foundation, I'm fortunate to work with community partners who are very, very capable. They trust the work that they're doing in the communities to engage young people toward their own success. What we're doing now is that second phase. We're building community trust. And the hope is that in the years to come, we can activate that trust to ensure that all young people, particularly those who need us most, are able to move from risk to promise. So I've learned that the point at which we trust ourselves and each other implicitly is that point where we become powerful. Now, imagine what would happen if we move from trust to transformation together. Thank you.